Currently in Britain, there are 28 train operating companies. But which one is the worst? Well, I've already done an in-depth video on perhaps the most common answer, Avanti West Coast. But I believe CrossCountry are also in the running for the title that no train company wants to be given. However, despite intense overcrowding and poor service reliability, can and will things get better for CrossCountry? And are they truly Britain's worst train operating company? Well, first, let's delve into the history of the UK's largest railway franchise. Prior to CrossCountry beginning operations, the franchise was split into two different operators: the Virgin Cross Country operator, which operated the Intercity Cross Country franchise from privatisation, with Central Trains operating the Central Trains franchise from privatisation. This meant that today's cross-country network, as we know it, which I'll get into shortly, was operated by two different operators, with Virgin Cross Country operating their long-distance services using their brand new Voyager sets from southern England up towards Manchester and Scotland, while Central Trains operated using the new Class 170 Turbostars along regional routes from Nottingham, Stansted and Cardiff into Birmingham. In June 2006, this was all about to change when the Department for Transport announced provisional plans to merge some of the Virgin Cross Country and Central Train services into the new Cross Country franchise, with the Department for Transport issuing an invite to tender to 4 different companies in October: Arriva, First, National Express and Virgin. With National Express and Virgin already running part of the franchise, they were tipped to be favourites. Despite this, Arriva was announced as the first operator of the new Cross Country franchise in July 2007, running until April 2016 at the earliest. They would inherit all 34 Class 220 Voyagers and 22 Class 221s, as well as 29 Class 170s, a diesel-only stock despite running under wires for large parts of their journey. CrossCountry would also be the only train company to not manage any stations, even though at some stations they would be the only operator at these stations. For example, at Hinckley, which is managed by East Midlands Railway despite not receiving any East Midlands Railway services. This was due to a clause in CrossCountry's franchise which suggests the operator shouldn't focus on operating stations. As part of the franchise, Arriva Cross Country promised 40 extra carriages in the form of the return of HSTs operating cross-country services, internal layout changes for the Voyagers to provide a 25% increase in luggage storage space, more staff members on trains, new websites for ticketing, refurbishments to the Class 170s with the introduction of first class and better integration with other operators for connecting services. With the new franchise came a change of services. Previously, Virgin Cross Country operated services from Birmingham towards Glasgow via Crewe and Preston along the West Coast Main Line, with services also extending south towards Brighton via Gatwick Airport, with the Glasgow via Preston services being moved over to the Intercity West Coast operator, ironically remaining under Virgin, and the Brighton services to be ceased by December 2008 due to them not being required to be run by CrossCountry in their franchise, and the services not being profitable to keep on running. Also ceasing would be the former Central Train services via Worcester, which would instead be diverted along the fast lines into Birmingham or Cheltenham. So then, apart from these reductions, where did CrossCountry serve from 2007? The trunk intercity route was from Penzance up towards Scotland, and the Bournemouth to Manchester routes, which were operated with the Voyager trains, with regional services from Stansted and Nottingham towards Birmingham and Cardiff operated by the Class 170s. CrossCountry also confirmed new daily services from Nottingham to Bournemouth. 6 of the 10 HS2 locomotives, forming 5 sets in total, came from off-lease Midland mainline sets withdrawn after the Class 222s entered service, receiving 13 Mark IIIs from the company. The other 4 HST power cars and Mark IIIs were from a mixture of former Virgin Cross Country and West Coast stock. However, they were in a poor state after being in storage for several years. The Midland mainline ones were in better nick, with them entering service in May 2008, whilst the Virgin HSTs received new MTU engines and the Mark IIIs gained a full refurbishment. This refurbishment saw power sockets installed at every seat, new catering facilities, Wi-Fi installed, and the full makeover of the interior saloons to replicate CrossCountry's branding with new seats installed. Each set would provide CrossCountry with 550 seats, a much-needed capacity increase amidst news reports of severe overcrowding on routes. After the Virgin sets entered service, the Midland mainline ones received similar overhauls and refurbishments until all HSTs entered service by the December 2008 timetable. For the summer of 2008 though, CrossCountry decided to do something relatively out of the blue, with HSTs returning to Paignton for the first time since 1996. However, these HST sets wouldn't be the ones CrossCountry currently operated. CrossCountry hired two 9-car HST sets with buffet car and first class for summer services from Paignton and Newquay from National Express East Coast, with select diagrams costing as little as £21 from Manchester to Newquay. Overall, HSTs helped bolster CrossCountry's fleet and services, with the company originally showing creativity in approaching different scenarios such as the added holiday passengers. As well as this, XE confirmed all Class 170s would be refurbished, receiving the CrossCountry branding and interior saloon makeovers. However, although the HSDs had them, the 170s would not receive plug sockets in standard class. But it wasn't all bad news. The December 2008 timetable change not only included the HSTs arriving into service, but now included several key changes, such as half-hourly services to Bristol, Reading, Manchester, Sheffield and Leicester, hourly services between Plymouth and Edinburgh, Reading and Newcastle, and Bournemouth to Manchester, as well as faster journey times to services in the northeast of England. Also in December 2008, CrossCountry lost several Class 221s to Virgin West Coast, making overcrowding issues more prominent, and there were timetable cuts to services south of Guildford, as aforementioned. Also in 2008, the tilt feature on Class 221s, which could see them increase their top speeds, was switched off to reduce maintenance costs. Overall though, CrossCountry's first major timetable overhaul was a vast improvement, but did not signal what was the future for the company, with timetables not changing an awful lot from this change. Later in 2010, the company confirmed that the Newcastle to Reading services would be extended to terminate at Southampton, giving them 10 more cross-country services a day. However, it wasn't all good news for CrossCountry. In late 2009, the BBC ran a special on overcrowded cross-country services called Inside Out. They discovered that services were so overcrowded that passengers would end up standing for up to 3 hours, some occupying the toilet just to have more space. CrossCountry suggested that they had invested heavily to deliver an extra 2,500 seats per weekday. However, with no new stock coming in, the services would not improve, and overcrowding would only continue to worsen, as we shall see later in the video. Following the BBC reports, passengers flooded in their experiences on CrossCountry. One passenger, Emma Betham, said she had to travel for 6 hours in a filthy carriage, which was so overcrowded she couldn't access a toilet with her 2 young children. Another, Mark Bennett, suggested that CrossCountry needed more than 4 coaches on their Manchester to Bournemouth services, citing that the new Pendolinos with Virgin Trains had 9 coaches. So why, even in 2009, were services so packed and overcrowded? And why are they even more so today? And what other reasons could make CrossCountry a bad operator? And is anything being done about this? Well, firstly, the main issue, overcrowding. Simply, they replaced old British Rail HSC sets, which would have been much longer and suited to the service, with the Voyagers ordered by Virgin Cross Country, with them not being suitable enough or long enough for long distance travel. CrossCountry had to retrofit luggage racks and remove seats from carriages. Despite a small refresh in 2012, the Voyagers have retained practically the same interiors since their construction, making them over 20 years old. Also, the Department for Transport must take blame. Despite the CrossCountry contract initially running until 2016, they awarded the contract to Arriva until 2019 without any competition or bidding process. This is known as a direct award. This then meant, despite CrossCountry's passenger numbers growing much higher than anyone had anticipated, the DFT did not make up for this growth by incorporating new rolling stock into the franchise, and instead awarded a direct award, this later extended until 2020. As well as this, a campaign by Stand Up for Sitting Down highlighted the woes of CrossCountry. They wanted CrossCountry to remove first class from its voyages due to the huge overcrowding that was being seen, arguing that more seats could be provided if the first class cabins were reduced, leading to less overcrowding. As expected, CrossCountry denied any request for this, citing the high income first class made for the company. Some improvements were made to try and bolster CrossCountry's fleet. They reactivated 2 former Virgin Class 221 driving cars, with 2 of the existing 5-car Class 221 centre carriages being put into this new 221 set, forming 221-144, a well-needed extra 4-car unit. Also, later in 2021, CrossCountry bolstered 6 of its 2-car Class 170s to form 3 coaches, with centre carriages becoming available when West Midlands Railway's Class 170s went off lease, with the driving cars heading to East Midlands Railway, leaving the centre carriages available for CrossCountry. However, it wasn't all good news for CrossCountry. The now 6 HST sets formed as 7 Mark III coaches, now with sliding doors installed, were confirmed to be leaving CrossCountry from September 2023 due to the age of the Class 43 HSTs. This posed a large problem for CrossCountry, with no new units coming into service, meaning that 40 coaches would be lost in total, with the final HST set being withdrawn on the 18th of September 2023, marking an end of an era for HST services from Plymouth towards Leeds, Newcastle and Scotland. This meant an already stretched Voyager fleet would now have to cover for the former HST sets, leading to most services being now formed of 4 or 5 coaches, with some being extended to 8 coaches when an extra Voyager is available. However, this is equally as rare as it was in 2007 as it is today. Things would have got worse for CrossCountry if they went ahead with proposed services which it pushed for in December 2016. The services would have seen an extension of services from Bristol to Exeter, more services at peak time, and more services towards Aberdeen. However, CrossCountry did suggest dropping services to Paignton, Guildford, and, in the early morning and evening, to Aberdeen. Eventually, these services did not go ahead, with Exeter still receiving just 1 cross-country train per hour. Also, on the talk of service changing, COVID-19 severely hindered CrossCountry's overcrowding issue, with services, as of the May timetable change in 2024, still not back up to pre-pandemic frequency, despite the most recent figures from October to December 2023, showing rail passengers are now very close to reaching pre-pandemic levels, and probably have by the summer of 2024. Services are less frequent, such as the Newcastle to Reading services being 1 train per 2 hours, rather than the previous hourly services, meaning that stations between Leamington Spa and Reading get a less frequent service than the previous 2 trains per hour northbound towards Birmingham. Also, summer services towards Newquay are not going ahead for summer 2024, with cross-country services now no longer calling at Guildford and a reduced service towards Stansted Airport. So apart from their lack of available fleet and overcrowding, why else would CrossCountry be considered the UK's worst operator? Well, reliability and passenger satisfaction is definitely a topic for debate. In January 2024, just 50.6% of services were on time to their destination, with this up from a record low of 37.5% in September 2023, with CrossCountry averaging just 51% across the whole of 2023. Cancelled trains also peaked at over 16.2% in October of 2023, averaging around 8.2% for the whole of the year, most of these due to lack of rolling stock or staff. Short-form services also consistently hit over 3.4% across every month of 2023, and that's compared to CrossCountry's expected length of service, not what is actually required for the amount of passengers on that service, with most services probably being short-formed in this effect. Between July and June 2023, over 3% of all services arrived over half an hour late, with this averaging well over 1.8% across 2023. Strikes have also not helped CrossCountry's reliability, with their staff taking part in regular strike action since 2022, with limited to no services operating on strike days. As well as this, they also were involved in the 2016 to 2019 rail strikes and had their own strike action to deal with. In November 2017, CrossCountry on-board RMT staff conducted 7-day-long strikes due to an internal dispute with Arriva over staff rostering and Sunday workings. Strikes were eventually called off for January, with an agreement being reached. However, just weeks later, another union, the TSSA union, announced strikes planned for the end of January 2018, with their staff only being offered a 1% pay increase versus the rest of Arriva's train companies, who received a 3.3% pay increase. Eventually, Arriva gave in to the union's demands, with the staff receiving the 3.3% pay increase, equal of that with other Arriva companies. So CrossCountry's reliability is poor, and they are also involved in strike action regularly. But how else can CrossCountry be deemed a poor operator? Well, their stock. I touched on it earlier, but it is in dire need of a refurbishment, one that may well be coming. As aforementioned, the CrossCountry Voyagers haven't received a refurbishment since, well, their introduction reversion in the early 2000s, with only a light refresh coming in the 2010s. This has led to them becoming hugely outdated, very dirty, and not at all suitable for the journeys that they undertake. Even their vestibules aren't in a nice state, and that's coming from someone who's had to sit in many cross-country vestibules. The Class 170s aren't much better either, with the trains just generally dirty and grotty, last refurbished in 2008. All this shows in CrossCountry's passenger surveys. They suggest their target for the 2023 train interior satisfaction is to get around 63%, which is already quite low. They averaged just 52%, with the first 4 months of 2023 averaging under 50% satisfaction rating for CrossCountry's train interiors. This was such a low score that CrossCountry actually lowered its targets down to just 60% satisfaction for 2024, which seems absurdly low. Their cleanliness ratings were better, averaging in the 70% range, with CrossCountry targeting 79%. That was until mid-2024, when they lowered that target by 14% to a huge low of 65%, perhaps because that's a score that they can meet. However, even this seems unlikely, given since the target changes, CrossCountry's cleanliness satisfaction ratings have plummeted to under 65%. However, I'll give them some slack and assume that they've changed the way that they measure their scores, but still, a decrease like that is impressively poor. Staff helpfulness was rated as relatively high, and I'm not attacking the staff in this video. However, a 100% satisfaction rating in February 2022 does spark some eyebrow raisers. However, perhaps they just received little customer feedback that month. However, I did mention that CrossCountry did have a potential refurbishment in line for their stock, and they do, and this has been confirmed. So what are CrossCountry going to do to improve on the issues covered thus far? Well, firstly, the refurbishment of all units currently in the CrossCountry fleet. This was confirmed along with a franchise extension in September 2023, lasting until 2027. The refurbishment will see the Voyagers completely stripped out with full makeovers to the interior saloons, including new seats and much more tables, by May 2026. This coincides with the refurbishment of the Turbo Styles to similar fashions, with all units planned to receive a striking new pink and blue colour scheme and livery. This should bring CrossCountry's units back to the 21st century standards and provide a much nicer travelling experience. However, without new stock, CrossCountry will struggle to remove overcrowding. Luckily though, CrossCountry announced in early 2024 that they would be receiving 12 Class 221s once they leave Avanti West Coast in late 2024, with 60 additional carriages and a 25% capacity increase, with the losses from the HST withdrawals finally balancing out by May 2025. However, whether overcrowding will reduce is yet to be known, with CrossCountry also confirming it would bolster Newcastle to Reading services to hourly like it was before COVID, and a new Cardiff to Edinburgh service by May 2025. So perhaps we won't see the large capacity increases that CrossCountry really need, with no new stock for the regional services towards Cardiff, Nottingham, Stansted, which are usually very crowded themselves. Regardless, the news of new stock has been welcomed by CrossCountry passengers, including myself. Personally, I'm looking forward to the whole redevelopment and revitalisation of the network for CrossCountry. However, I don't think it will be enough to reduce overcrowding entirely, with the Voyagers also still being fully diesel despite much of their routes running under wires, such as the 1 hour 30 leg from Birmingham to Manchester and the even longer journey up to Scotland. Hence, I believe CrossCountry should have or should go for some new bi-mode stock. As controversial as the Class 8OXs have been with the likes of GWR and LNER, they would suit CrossCountry and would enable a greener travel. However, like all the problems CrossCountry have faced, the Department for Transport and Arriva must be blamed for the lack of investment. And CrossCountry are not going to get electric vehicles, I think, until the whole network is electrified, including the Chiltern Main Line, the route down to Reading and the route down to Bristol, which does not have any estimated dates to be electrified. The regional routes operated by the Class 170s aren't even planned to be electrified in the near future, so it's more than likely that CrossCountry will replace the Class 170s with more diesel stock in the next 10 to 20 years, and the future of the Voyagers is unknown. However, they'll probably still continue to be serving for the next 10 to 20 years. Regardless of this though, CrossCountry services will improve and overcrowding will reduce slightly by 2026, and that's more or less a guarantee. However, as of 2024, as I'm writing this script, CrossCountry definitely is a case of being the worst operator in terms of passenger experience, and it's not at all the fault of CrossCountry staff. Personally, I've had many poor experiences with CrossCountry in standard and first class, with there being countless times where I've been unable to get a seat and had to sit in the vestibule area. The trains are also currently dirty and outdated, with the planned refurbishment coming as a huge relief. So then, the big question is CrossCountry truly Britain's worst operator? Well, it's hard to come up with any close rivals. Avanti West Coast are still unreliable, but have a much nicer fleet, with the new Class 805s and 807s probably in service by the time this video releases, hopefully allowing for an increase in reliability. Other operators like Northern Trains and Transpennine Express have also begun to improve, with South Western Railway being the only potential rival, and I still think their services are much better than that of CrossCountry's. Hence, CrossCountry does take the not-so-wanted crown for me. Although, once again, this is only the fault of the higher-up management, and is more of a case for why the railways need to be renationalised or just changed in general. The management from the government down to the train companies is just not correct, and something must be done. However, what do you think? Am I being too harsh on CrossCountry and the government, or should we take time and wait until 2026 to see if the improvements they have promised have been delivered on? Well, let me know in the comments below. Do consider liking, subscribing, and joining the channel for cool perks. Special thanks to my first class member, Callum Martin Bell, and my business zone members, Andrew Bowen, Anthony Harris, Craig Mitchell 43, and Smudgy Cat. Also thanks to Devaruni for his donations and membership. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to check out my Twitter, Discord and Instagram in the links below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.